Some artifacts don't explain themselves. They offer no inscription, no builder's mark, no tale to anchor them in time. Found in mountains, deserts, islands, and lake beds, these objects are undeniably real, measured, photographed, studied, yet they defy clear interpretation. Some were carved into volcanic stone, others submerged beneath ancient waters. A few declared forgeries without ever being understood. None belong to the known chapters of history. They seem to exist just outside the narrative. Whispers from cultures lost or silenced. Were they ceremonial, astronomical? Warnings, records, or deceptions? No one agrees. But all of them share one trait: silence. No voices left to explain their purpose. Just the artifact, and the question it quietly poses to every visitor: what was I made for? In 1595, laborers clearing rubble near the Abbey of Sacromonte in Granada uncovered a sealed lead disc hidden inside a cave wall, wrapped in parchment alongside bone fragments. Over the next 30 years, dozens more were found, flattened sheets of lead, some folded like books, others shaped like medallions. Each bore inscriptions in Latin, Arabic, and an invented script that imitated early Arabic forms. They became known as the Lead Books of Sacromonte. The texts claimed to be the testimonies of early Christian martyrs in Roman Hispania, followers of Saint Cecilio. But their content challenged orthodoxy. They spoke of Christ and the Virgin Mary, but also referred to Muhammad in favorable terms and suggested that Arabic, not Latin or Greek, had been the sacred language of early Christianity in Spain. These ideas, emerging during the reign of Philip III in a post-Reconquista Spain hostile to Morisco culture, were explosive. Were these messages theological bridges or veiled resistance? At first, the discoveries were embraced. Archbishop Pedro de Castro, a powerful church figure sympathetic to the local Morisco population, saw in them divine affirmation that Christianity had deeper, multilingual roots. Public processions were held, relics venerated, and the Abbey of Sacromonte became a pilgrimage site. But not all agreed. As early as the 1630s, scholars began voicing doubts. Linguists noted awkward Latin phrasing and grammatical inconsistencies. Historians challenged the anachronisms. How could texts from Roman times blend languages and concepts that had no historical overlap? By 1642, Spanish historian Nicolas Antonio publicly declared the texts to be forgeries. His accusations reached Rome, where an ecclesiastical commission was formed. After decades of deliberation, the Vatican formally condemned the lead books in 1682, under Pope Innocent XI, denouncing them as heretical fabrications and forbidding their use in religious practice. Still, no author was ever identified. The prevailing theory is that Morisco intellectuals, well-educated descendants of forcibly converted Muslims, crafted the books in the late 16th century as a spiritual protest. By blending Christian and Islamic themes and using both Latin and Arabic, they may have sought to protect a threatened identity. Or was it something more audacious, a deliberate attempt to rewrite Spain's sacred history from within? What sets the lead books apart from common forgeries is their complexity. They were not made for money or fame. They were hidden deliberately, buried alongside bones and relics, and written in a hybrid language that few could read. Their authors expected them to be discovered, just not questioned. Did they believe time would turn their invention into truth? They still reside in Granada, locked in glass, stripped of their sacred status but never dismissed entirely. Condemned by the church, ignored by mainstream history, yet never fully explained. And from this blend of sacred deception and lost identity, we now travel to a far older enigma, one carved into stone high in the Andes, where a door waits that opens into nothing at all. Carved into a wall of red granite in the highlands of southern Peru, not far from the shoreline of Lake Titicaca, stands a structure that defies classification. Nearly 2 meters tall and a little over a meter wide, the T-shaped niche is cut with smooth precision into an otherwise natural stone outcrop. It resembles a doorway, but opens onto nothing. Behind it is solid rock. What purpose does a door serve when it leads nowhere? This isolated structure, known today as Aramu Muru, lies in the region of Güímar, a landscape long occupied by pre-Inca civilizations. The flat, smoothed stone surface that frames the niche is approximately 7 meters tall and just as wide. At its center sits the so-called door, a recess measuring 1.98 meters high and 1.23 meters wide, but only about 15 centimeters deep. There are no inscriptions, no extensions, no chambers beyond the cut. It is not a tomb, not a gateway, not a monument in any traditional sense. Why carve something so precise without leaving a single clue behind? The surrounding region has been settled for thousands of years. The Pucara culture flourished here from around 500 BCE to 200 CE. Later, the Tiwanaku civilization dominated the Lake Titicaca basin from 400 to 1000 CE, followed by the Inca Empire from the 1200s to the early 1500s CE. Yet Aramu Muru doesn't match any of their known architectural styles. No texts, no oral histories, no colonial records mention it. Could it have been made by a culture we've yet to identify? A legend, unverified but persistent, claims that an Inca priest fleeing the Spanish in the 16th century carried a golden disc to this very spot. He placed it into a small depression beside the niche and vanished into the rock. There's no archaeological evidence to support the story, yet it persists. Was the legend invented to explain the structure, or was the structure preserved because of the legend? Academic interpretations remain cautious. Some believe the doorway was an abandoned construction project, a shrine or ceremonial gateway left incomplete. Others argue it may have served a symbolic or astronomical role, yet the niche aligns with no known solstice, no sacred orientation. Why commit so much labor to carve red granite, a notoriously hard stone, with no obvious function, no markings, no offerings, and no aftermath? Even stranger is what surrounds it. Nothing. Most Andean huacas, sacred places, are part of a broader ceremonial landscape, tied to water, sky, or burial. Aramu Muru is entirely alone. There are no pottery shards, no tools, no footprints in history. Was it part of a vanished ritual, or was isolation itself the point? In the 1990s, the site gained international attention from New Age circles, who proclaimed it a stargate or portal to another dimension. Theories multiplied in the vacuum left by fact, but no evidence has ever emerged. Only questions, silence, and a perfectly symmetrical niche cut into one of the hardest stones in the Andes. It is not hidden, yet it offers nothing to enter. It was made to be seen but not explained. And from this solitary threshold in the highlands, we now journey to a very different structure. One not carved from rock, but raised from it. Step by step, stone by stone, pyramids rise on an island far from here. Visible, tangible, but just as disputed. On the eastern coast of Tenerife in Spain's Canary Islands, 6 step pyramids rise from volcanic soil. Built without mortar, their lava stone blocks are carefully arranged in terraces, each flat-topped and sharply edged. At first glance, they might be mistaken for agricultural features, just piles of stones cleared from farmland. For years, that's exactly how they were dismissed. But why would farmers build such symmetrical tiered structures only in this one place? That question drew the attention of Norwegian explorer Thor Heyerdahl in the 1990s. When he arrived in the town of Güímar, he saw not crude heaps, but calculated geometry. The steps were uniform, the edges sharp, the terraces methodically stacked. Heyerdahl partnered with Spanish astronomer Antonio Belmonte, and together they uncovered something more. On June 21st, the summer solstice, the sun sets directly between 2 of the pyramids. Their western faces also align with the rising sun during the winter solstice. Was this astronomical planning, or just an illusion of alignment? Mainstream scholars remain unconvinced. Most argue the pyramids were built during the 19th century CE as part of local farming efforts or landscape modification. The land was once owned by Don Felipe, a Freemason. Some suggest he either constructed or preserved the pyramids as symbolic monuments reflecting Masonic beliefs. But no records survive, and no one knows whether he built them or simply let them stand. Why would a landowner in the 1800s go to such lengths for symmetry and sun? Archaeologists note that no organic materials, artifacts, or burial sites have been found beneath or around the pyramids, nothing that would indicate pre-Hispanic origin. The Guanche people, who inhabited Tenerife from at least 1000 BCE, left behind cave dwellings and circular sanctuaries, but no pyramids. If these structures were truly ancient, why is there no trace of them in Guanche tradition? Still, the forms remain provocative. They bear a resemblance to pyramids found in Egypt, Mesoamerica, and Polynesia, cultures that Heyerdahl believed were linked by ancient sea routes. He proposed the pyramids were evidence of transoceanic contact, a theory supported by pattern but not by excavation. Could such a theory ever be proven without tools, bones, or offerings? Or are we simply seeing connections where none exist? In 1998, the site was preserved as the ethnographic park of the pyramids of Güímar. It showcases Heyerdahl's research, solar observatories, and exhibits on navigation and ancient cultures. But the pyramids themselves remain elusive. They are too symmetrical to dismiss as accidental, too recent to be called ancient, too orderly to be ignored. If they were built merely to clear fields, why do they align with the sun? And if they were meant to mean something, what was it? From volcanic terraces aligned with celestial rhythms, we now travel north to a very different mystery, one not built from blocks, but carved from a single stone. A Viking-era image that blends myth, death, and journey, yet refuses to explain which. Windswept fields and ancient burial grounds mark the Swedish island of Gotland, but among them stands something far less understood, a stone carved over 1,000 years ago. Known as the Tjängvide image stone, it rises just over 1.7 meters tall and is covered with a series of etched figures. A rider on horseback, a large ship with curved prow, intertwined animals, and symbols now lost to memory. It was discovered in the late 19th century, lying face down on a farm, repurposed as a threshold stone. No one knew what it was, only that it didn't belong to the ground it was buried in. The stone is dated to the Viking Age, most likely between 700 and 900 CE, and is one of the finest examples of Gotland's image stones, monuments unique to the island. But while others show stylized scenes of warriors or serpents, the Tjängvide stone is more enigmatic. The rider is unusually large, depicted mid-stride as if arriving or departing. The ship carries a crew but no battle. Above them looms what appears to be a mythical animal, flanked by looping bands that may be symbolic or merely decorative. What story is this stone trying to tell? Some scholars believe the stone depicts a journey to the afterlife. In Norse mythology, fallen warriors are carried to Valhalla, sometimes by horse, sometimes by ship. Is the rider entering the realm of the gods? Others suggest the scene is more personal, a tribute to a chieftain, a warrior, or a loved one lost at sea. But there are no runes, no inscriptions, no names carved into the surface. Why leave such a detailed scene and omit the voice behind it? The ship, too, raises questions. Viking ships were often symbols of prestige and power, associated with both life and death. Funeral ships were real and symbolic, buried with the dead or painted into memorials. On the Tjängvide stone, the ship seems to rise into another realm, suggesting that this is no ordinary voyage. Could it be an allegory, a mythic crossing, or a real journey retold as legend? Some interpretations go further. The size of the rider compared to the ship has led to speculation that this is Odin himself, arriving at Valhalla. Others argue that the stone blends multiple traditions, pre-Christian and Norse, into a symbolic fusion. Could it reflect a time of transition when old beliefs and new gods were fighting for the same space in stone? Despite decades of study, no single reading of the Tjängvide stone has prevailed. It exists between meanings, between myth and memory. It is art, but also grave marker, story, but also symbol. Perhaps it was meant to be interpreted only by those who knew the man it honored. How many meanings can one stone hold, and how many were already lost when the carving was first set into earth? From Sweden's windswept coast, we now descend back into the Andes, this time to Colombia, where ancient stone pillars rise in rows not for memory but for the sky. The calendar of a vanished people, measured not in words but in shadow. Central Colombia's highlands hold many traces of ancient life, but none quite like the field of carved stones near Villa de Leyva, once feared, later studied, still unexplained. Locals once called it El Infiernito, Little Hell, a name born of colonial discomfort, not ancient purpose. The Spaniards who stumbled upon it saw phallic shapes and declared it a site of pagan ritual. What they didn't see, or perhaps refused to, was its quiet precision. Long before Spanish conquest, this site served as a sacred space for the Muisca, one of the great civilizations of pre-Columbian South America. But archaeological evidence suggests its origins run even deeper, possibly tied to Pre-Muisca cultures as early as 800 BCE. At its center stand over 30 carved stone pillars, some aligned to mark the solstices and equinoxes. When the sun rises or sets on certain days of the year, shadows fall in exact patterns between them. Was this a temple, a calendar, or both? The Muisca are often overshadowed by the Inca, but they developed their own sophisticated systems of astronomy, trade, and governance. They used lunar and solar cycles to plan agriculture, ceremonies, and seasonal movements. El Infiernito may have been a physical embodiment of that knowledge, a place where time itself could be tracked in stone. But why has so much of their intellectual legacy faded, leaving only alignments and silence? Among the pillars are several upright stones interpreted as phallic symbols. These may have represented fertility, regeneration, or cosmic balance. Spanish chroniclers recoiled at them, declaring the site heretical and demonic. Some of the stones were toppled, others buried. How much was destroyed before it could ever be understood? Excavations have also revealed graves and funerary artifacts near the complex, suggesting that El Infiernito may have also served as a ceremonial burial site. Did the Muisca believe that the cosmos and the afterlife were one continuous cycle, each death part of a larger celestial order? Or were the alignments a means of guiding the spirit after death, just as they guided crops in life? Despite its name, there's nothing infernal about the place, only design and memory. It is astronomy carved into earth, a sacred map of time. Yet unlike the Inca or Maya, the Muisca left behind no codices, no carved histories. Their knowledge was oral, lost when their world was violently interrupted. What remains is stone that still marks the sky, a field where light and shadow still move in rhythm, just as they did 1,000 years ago. Who first stood here, watching the solstice sun land perfectly between two pillars, and what did they believe they were witnessing? From Colombia's measured stones, we now descend beneath another ancient sky. This one not tracked by shadow, but buried beneath water. A temple lost beneath Lake Titicaca, where the gods may once have looked down from above before being swallowed by the depths. Beneath the cold, high-altitude waters of Lake Titicaca, stone structures rest in silence, temples, platforms, and carved roads submerged under sediment and time. In 2000, a Bolivian-Italian archaeological expedition used sonar and diving equipment to investigate local legends of a city beneath the lake. What they found was startling: ruins stretching over a kilometer, with platforms and walls laid with precise masonry. Some stones weighing several tons. Had a sacred complex once stood here, now lost to rising water. Lake Titicaca, straddling the border of Bolivia and Peru, is the highest navigable lake in the world, sitting at an altitude of 3,812 meters. It was sacred to both the Tiwanaku civilization and later the Inca Empire, who believed the sun itself rose from its waters. But the structures discovered beneath its surface appear to predate both cultures. Pottery fragments and radiocarbon dating suggest they may be over 1,000 years old, possibly older. Built before Tiwanaku reached its height around 500 to 1000 CE. Who were the builders, and why did they choose this place? The site, near the village of Sampaya, includes what may have been a ceremonial platform, a long stone road, and rectangular enclosures. Some researchers believe the area could be part of a much larger complex, a sacred center that was later swallowed by the lake as its water levels rose. Were these people forced to abandon their city? Or did the flooding happen slowly, generation by generation, until memory itself was drowned? Local Aymara communities have long spoken of an underwater city, Wanaku, linked to ancient myths of the lake's origins. For centuries, these tales were dismissed as folklore, but with sonar readings and underwater photography confirming the presence of man-made structures, those stories now seem less like myth and more like memory. How often has archaeology caught up to what legend already knew? Unlike the well-studied ruins of Tiwanaku or Machu Picchu, this submerged site remains largely unexcavated. The logistics of underwater archaeology at high altitude are difficult, and the lake itself resists exploration. Its temperature icy, its visibility poor, yet questions continue to surface. Why would such a monumental site be built so close to water's edge? Was it meant to be seen by the gods, reflected in the sky above and the lake below? So far, no inscriptions have been found, no names, no royal tombs or dedications, only stones carefully placed, now hidden beneath the ripples. The architecture suggests cultural continuity with Tiwanaku, but its builders left no written legacy. Their city, if it was one, is without a voice. Who they were, how they lived, and what brought them to this sacred shore remain unanswered. A lost temple beneath a sacred lake, roads that lead into water, legends that turned out to be real, and yet without a single word from the past, we're left wondering, did this place fall to nature, or was it meant to disappear? From these drowned foundations we rise once more into the highlands, where towers still stand in silence, holding the dead upright. Our journey ends among the Sajama tombs, where the builders also left no name, only stone. Scattered across the remote altiplano near Bolivia's towering Mount Sajama, hundreds of stone towers rise in silence. These are chulpas, ancient burial monuments reaching up to 5 meters high, cylindrical or square, and often carefully constructed with mortarless masonry. Their placement seems deliberate, dotting the landscape like sentinels of the past. Some stand alone, others cluster together, but all face the rising sun. The region surrounding Sajama has been inhabited for millennia. The Lukamata site to the north dates back as far as 200 BCE, while Tiwanaku's influence spread through the Andes by 500 CE. Yet the chulpas near Sajama don't match the ceremonial architecture of Tiwanaku, nor do they align with the Inca style that followed. Instead, they hint at a lesser-known culture, organized, capable, and deeply invested in honoring their dead. Who were these people, and why did they build their tombs so high, so exposed? The structures themselves show impressive engineering. Built from volcanic stone or adobe, the towers were sometimes covered with plaster and painted in red or white, traces of which still survive in a few protected sites. Inside, bodies were placed in fetal position alongside grave goods, textiles, ceramics, and offerings, suggesting a belief in continuity beyond death. But there are no inscriptions, no names, no known oral traditions that link directly to these tombs. Why would a culture so invested in its dead leave behind no record of the living? Most chulpas are oriented eastward, toward the sunrise, implying cosmological beliefs rooted in rebirth or resurrection. Were they built to catch the first light of day, to awaken the ancestors? Or did they serve as markers, mapping celestial alignments or territorial claims in the high-altitude plains? Spanish chroniclers in the 16th century documented similar towers farther north, often describing them as idolatrous or pagan. Many were looted or destroyed. Near Sajama, the remote location preserved them longer, but even here weather and neglect have taken their toll. Some have collapsed. Others stand partially eroded, their stone skins flaking under wind and time. How many more were lost before they could be studied? The cultural identity of the builders remains uncertain. They may have been related to the Pacajes, a powerful Aymara-speaking kingdom that rose after Tiwanaku's decline, or to an earlier undocumented people whose legacy survives only in stone. No written records remain. No language has yet been tied conclusively to the chulpas' creators. And so they stand, isolated, unspeaking, but stubbornly present. Markers of a civilization that measured permanence not in cities, but in tombs. What kind of society builds such enduring monuments for the dead and leaves no stories for the living? From these towers of the forgotten, our journey through 7 enigmatic sites comes to an end. But the silence they share does not fade. It accumulates, pressing at the edges of what we know and what remains just out of reach. Some artifacts speak, others wait in silence. These 7 remain unclaimed, not because they are hidden, but because the people who made them left no voice behind. A laid book written in languages that don't coexist, a doorway carved into stone leading nowhere, a pyramid that rises but offers no burial, a Viking rider with no saga, columns tracking the sky without names, temples lost to water, towers holding the dead and nothing more. Each site is real, each built with purpose, and yet their meaning remains just beyond reach. What we've uncovered are fragments of belief, ritual, survival, set in stone but disconnected from the people who gave them form. Were they forgotten naturally or erased deliberately? Their creators are long gone. Their stories weren't written, but here we are, still asking questions, still standing in front of what they left. If these mysteries spoke to you, help others find them too. Like the video, share it with someone curious, and subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a comment. What artifact stayed with you? And when you're ready, there are more stories waiting to be uncovered. Just watch the next video. History may be silent, but we're still listening.